all the legislators who are here so far. That wasn't mentioned at the beginning. Representative Howard Mosby, who's the chair of the DeKalb Delegation, is very ill tonight. He has a fever, and so he sends his regrets that he can't be here with us. And with that, we'll start the question period. So if you all have any questions, if you stand up, say your name and where you live, and then your question.
My name is Keith Watkins. I'm a native of Atlanta, and I want to preface my remarks by saying that as long as I've lived in Atlanta, I've heard a joke that's made the rounds in Atlanta, mildly racist, to what does Marta stand for? Moving applicants rapidly through Atlanta. And I want to start by saying that Marta has been victimized by racism, first in its formation, Gwinnett, Cobb, and all these other counties refused to join Marta. So Marta was set up to fail from the beginning. And it's also been victimized by the racism of the General Assembly by refusing to fund Marta like all the other major systems in the country. And so, Mike, I have a big problem with your constant attacks on Marta because the problem is racism, not Marta. I'm sure Marta can be improved. I think privatization, private water and other didn't work. It was a massive failure. So I'm sure Marta can be improved, but this constant drumbeat of criticism against Marta when it has been victimized by racism throughout the years is, I have a problem with that. I have a big time problem. What DeKalb and Holcomb needs to do, it needs to secede from the state of Georgia, people in the legislature, a bunch of racist rednecks. They hate Atlanta. They hate Atlanta with a passion. They hate Marta with a passion. They're going to, DeKalb and Holcomb should just ignore the 50-50 thing. They should just ignore the state. They should secede from the state of Georgia. They should form an armed militia. And if the state of Georgia tries to threaten them, they should defend themselves. You got the state capitol complex in the city of Atlanta. You tell these rednecks, if they want to, assail Marta or assail DeKalb or Holcomb, they got to come into the city of Atlanta, and we'll be waiting for them. But I'm just fed up with Mike, you're an excellent legislator, but I mean, this attack on Marta, you're doing the bidding of the racists by continually attacking Marta when the problem is a lack of funding. It all goes back to racism. They should demand, Marta should demand that the state of Georgia immediately offer up $200 million a year in funding to support Marta. Because they're taking the money from Atlanta and DeKalb and send it down to South Georgia, North Georgia, build roads to nowhere. And that money should be staying in Atlanta and DeKalb. And if DeKalb and Fulton would secede from the state of Georgia, tell the state of Georgia, just leave us alone. We'll raise our own taxes. We'll fund Marta, but just leave us alone. The good old boys from down in South Georgia, just leave us alone and leave us be.
I'd like to tell you where my district is before Mike answers that question.
I think Representative Viola is ready to join the militia with you.
I'm the anti-militia person.
Oh, here.
No militias. My district starts at the courthouse and comes up on the east side of Claremont Road. And some of these, Leafmore and part of Druid Hills and part of Decatur and Sagamore and then Hawthorne and a little bit over on the west side of Beaufort Highway, Dresden East. So we all have new districts, and we're all anxious to meet people in our new districts. And maps are kind of hard. You want to answer that?
I'll gladly take that. First of all, I don't believe what you said about Marta. Let me just flat out dismiss that. Second of all, Marta, at the end of the day, is a state-authorized authority. Okay? It derives its authority from state law. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we sometimes lose sight of the fact, and this is a fact, that we had Elliot Levitas come and provide some testimony, former congressman, provide some testimony. He was around at the time that Marta was enacted and can speak with authority. Representative Geisinger, our colleague, who was around in the General Assembly back in the 60s, can also attest to this. That at the time that Marta was enacted, the use of a penny sales tax for a local purpose was unheard of. Unheard of. The penny sales tax at the time was a state funding mechanism. Now, over time, it was a big give on the state's part to allow the penny sales tax to be used for a localized purpose. Over time, we've adopted, there's a transportation SLOSS in the general code, there's an education SLOSS in the general code, the DeKalb has an education SLOSS, authorizing local jurisdictions to levy penny sales taxes for localized purposes has become more prevalent over time. So I don't buy the argument that there is, the reality is that DeKalb and Fulton County residents pay a penny sales tax to support Marta, okay? I pay that sales tax, Representative Oliver pays that sales tax, you pay that sales tax. And at the end of the day, we have a role to play as the keepers of the state law that governs how Marta operates and how Marta operates. Now, would I like to see direct operating assistance at some point appropriated from the state budget? I'd be willing to see that, but I don't think we're going to get there until Marta is operating as efficiently as possible. And that is where I am coming from as chair of the Marta Oversight Committee and with the legislation that I am pushing in the General Assembly. Period, end of story. I mean, we can go back and forth with this age-old debate over, who's paying for Marta, because the reality is, okay, well, there's not much, there is actually some operating assistance that comes from the state. It doesn't come, it's not direct, it's not appropriated, no, it comes from, there has been, there has been.
Of the 50 states in the United States of America, Georgia is the only one that spends not one dime of generally created revenue on public transport.
I understand.
And
So,
this is the question that's always perplexed me. How and when could we have fixed the problem and the error that was made when only 2 counties voted?
well, I mean,
That is the problem. When should we have fixed that? 2012, is it too late?
I don't, well, okay. First of all, first of all, it is not true that the state has never contributed money to Marta, period. And in fact, it has happened in recent years. There is no direct appropriation from the state budget. That is true, okay? There is no direct appropriation from the state budget, but there has been money provided by the state to Marta in recent years. That is also true, okay? Now, the reality is that although the state doesn't directly appropriate anything, DeKalb County doesn't directly appropriate anything to Marta, City of Atlanta doesn't directly appropriate anything to Marta, and Fulton County doesn't directly appropriate anything to Marta. So at the end of the day, we get back to that penny sales tax that we all pay. So let's just boil all of that down to what it is. Now, the reality is that you cannot deny that one of the messages of the T-SPLOST vote was that the region is not ready to accept broadening transit until Marta's house is in order. That's one of the reads that I get from the T-SPLOST vote, and I don't think there's any other way to read it. So one of my objectives is to deliver a Marta that is as efficient as possible. And I hope that that ultimately yields more participation in Marta, that it yields regional governance that ultimately works Marta into a broader regional system, hopefully that it at least includes Fulton, DeKalb, Cobb, Gwinnett, and Clayton counties. That's my ultimate vision for where we go, but we cannot get there from here unless we have a Marta that is operating as efficiently as possible, and that is the reality.
Okay, are you blaming the failure of T-SPLOST strictly on Marta and its region? Is that what I heard you say?
That's not what I said.
Okay, good. Because I'm convinced it failed from Marta.
People want to ask something other than Marta?
Yeah, hang on. I just wanted to, we had a Marta operating today, as a matter of fact, and I sit on that committee with Mike. little bit of misconception out there. You know, I lived in Japan for a long time. I'm a big transit proponent. But at the end of the day, I think Fran Miller said this at the meeting today, you know, to the Marta folks, you know, we're the cheerleaders for this. We want it to succeed. I want it to be regionalized. But there are problems internally right now that need to be resolved before we're going to get buy-in from surrounding counties and the T-SPLOST. And to go to Michelle's point, I think there are a lot of reasons that, you know, we can spend this ad tonight why the T-SPLOST failed. And part of it was lack of trust in elected officials, to be frank. But I think we've beaten Marta for a little bit. Does anybody else have a question on another subject?
Well, I just had a comment to say. So I know you are.
Yes, thank you. My name is Dave Duncan, I'm a resident of DeKalb County. And I work in air transport, and we know that, you know, privatization is not necessarily the cure for everything in government, right? So one of the biggest things that a government needs to keep close to their chest is the safety of the public. So that can't be outsourced. So when we go about fixing Marta, we need to use models, right, that not necessarily are private models, but models that work in a government setting.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I mean, at the end of the day, the blueprint for, at minimum, what should be done is already been spelled out for us. I mean, KPMG performed an audit that has been delivered that clearly spells out that there is significant room for privatization that would achieve a cost savings at Marta based upon what peer transit systems are doing. So I'm not just advocating privatization for privatization's sake. I am advocating based upon the findings of an independent auditor found that ultimately there are cost savings to be wrung out of the system as it exists today.
I understand. Are you going for complete privatization, or are you taking a more structured approach and looking at what areas need to be retained by the state?
Definitely a structured approach.
For everybody who's interested, that report is available online on the Marta website.